Morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We will begin with chapter 31, verse 2. So Moshe Rabbeinu has called together the Jewish people, or he's gone to them. We've had different ideas in the Mefarshim. And it says now in the verse, Vayomer Eleihem, he says to them, Ben meyav esrim shana anochi hayom, I am 120 years old today. Lo chalod lotzeis v'lavo, I am no longer able, I will no longer be able to go out and to come. Vashem amari lai lo savor sayerdei nazeh. And God told me, don't cross the Jordan. So I'm done. My term of duty is over. Verse 3. Hashem Elokecha hu over lefanecha. Hashem passes before you. Hu yashmin es hagoyim v'yelim lefanecha v'yishtam. He will drive out these nations from before you. Yoshua hu over lefanecha kasher diber Hashem. Yoshua will pass before you, as God said. This all, of course, makes sense. It's just like if I were to ask you, so what exactly is the purpose of these psukim? What exactly did they not know before that they now know? Did he have to say this so drawn out? So there's an interesting Ramban on this pasuk. Vayom pasuk beis Ramban. Vayomer Eleihem ben meyav esrim shana anochi hayom v'zeh lenachim osam al inyanav. This is to console the Jewish people. Yomar, ani zaking, ve'ein lachem o toeles mimeni. I'm elderly. You no longer have a purpose for me. Why does he have to say I'm not able to come and go? Let him just say, God said I can't cross the Jordan. God's going to take care of you. So he wants to console them. He said, look, there's not that much I bring to the table at this point. Va'od, ki Hashem yisparach tzivani shelo evor sham. It's not only an observation that how much do I bring to the table. God said I'm not going, so I'm not going. V'al tifchadu v'al tiru. Don't be afraid. Ki Hashem yavor imachem. Remember, I think we mentioned this yesterday. It's so telling to just reflect on the last time the people thought Moshe was gone, and he wasn't even gone. But the last time people thought Moshe was gone, the golden calf happened. So in a sense, I think this is Moshe learning from previous experiences. Let me be very clear. God's going to go with you. Lo yisalek shchinaso mikem ba'avuri. Even though I've been the constant conduit of God to your people, it's not like you're not going to have a connection with God because I'm out of the picture. V'Yoshua hu over lefnechem bimkomi. He's not just saying that Yoshua will be your leader. He's saying Yoshua will be your leader in my place. So he will now be the conduit to God. What do you mean you're not able to go? What does that mean? So if you remember, we had the Kliyakar yesterday who said able might mean that theoretically it might mean he's not physically able to walk and come, or it means I don't have permission. But the Ramban's not going with that. The Ramban's saying, look, it says in the pasuk he's not able. How could you say he's not able? Later on, when he actually dies, it says that, the moisture from his cheek, the clarity of his eye was not gone. So that means he was still physically vigorous. So what does he mean he's not able? Says the Ramban, Amar lahen kein lenachamim. This is all just part of the consolation package. Really, he is able. He's just trying to make them feel not so bad. So he says, I'm not going to be able to do this anymore. But he's not only saying he's not going to be able to do this anymore, he's clarifying that God is still going to be with him despite his absence. And he's also clarifying that Yoshua will be a conduit to God. As we mentioned a moment ago, in the context of the Yakar, Rashi says what he means when he says I'm not able is I'm not able because God says it's not going to happen. So he's not giving a comment on his physical abilities of the moment. He's just saying it's just not going to happen. So I'm not able to. But the Ramban doesn't agree. So says the Ibn Ezra, it doesn't mean he's not able to walk around. It means he's not able to go out in war. So he's able to go, he's able to come, he's able to walk around in front of them, but to be a military leader, it's not happening anymore. So that's why he says his term is ending. But now he brings out a very interesting Gemara of Rabbi Seinu Amru, Melamed shenistapu mimenu mainos hachachma. The Gemara says that what this means is that the well springs of wisdom were closed for him. In other words, all of a sudden he had less intellectual acuity than he normally did, or less connection to Hashem's Torah, whatever exactly it means. Now that would be totally out of step with how we describe him physically. Says, which of course happens in our world, we know that, but the Ramban says something else over here. This was a miracle that God made it, that he wasn't as mentally or Torah oriented clear as he had been before. That's what he means. He says, I'm not able to do this anymore, but this was a kindness from God. Why? That's fascinating, because if Moshe was of his full powers and abilities, says the Ramban, it'll be very difficult for Moshe to hand over the reins of leadership to Yoshua while Moshe is still there. It would just be very difficult. So if Moshe, honest to goodness knows, he can't do the job anymore, it's different. So we have a number of ideas. The Ramban starts off by saying he's just trying to make them feel good. He's perfectly able. That's what the Ramban said. Rashi said, doesn't mean he's not able. It means he's not able because God says he's not going to do it. The Ibn Ezra says it means he's not going to lead the Jewish people in war. He's not able to do that anymore. And then the Ramban brings down a Gemara that says that his mental abilities had diminished. Okay, let's go on to verse 9. Vayichtov Moshe HaTorah Azos. Moshe wrote this Torah. Vayitnoel Kohanim b'nei Levi hanosim es Aron b'ris Hashem. Moshe wrote the Torah and gave it to the Levium. Or the Kohanim, excuse me, gave it to the Kohanim, Viel Kozik Israel, and to all of the elders. Okay? When we say Moshe wrote the Torah, how much of the Torah do we mean? Rashi says, if you look at Rashi and Pasuk Tes, Vayichtov Moshe Vayitnak, Shenigmar Kula, Nisana Livnei Shifto. So now that the Torah is complete, or basically complete, so this is the whole Torah, he writes it and he gives it to the members of his tribe. In other words, he gives it to the Kohanim from the tribe of Levi. That's what Rashi says. Just for the contrast, if you look at the Sforno, Es HaTorah Azos, Parshas HaMelech, Shetziva Tashiyakra B'Hakel. The next psukim are going to talk about the mitzvah of Hakel. Hakel is the mitzvah, it's a Sukkot, the year after Shemitah. The Jewish people come together to hear the king read different sections of the Torah. So that's going to be the next psukim right after this. So the Sforno says that what Moshe wrote is the section of Hakel. He didn't write the whole Torah now. He wrote the section of Hakel. Why did he give it to the Kohanim b'nei Levi? Shemiyadam yikablena hamelech hakore kosesh shoninu haskan nostal kohen gadol hamelech. There's a whole procession when the Torah is read from it, Hakel, and the Kohen Gadol hands the Torah to the king to read from the Torah. So it's appropriate if Moshe now has prepared the scroll that will be used for Hakel whenever that time comes, he hands it to the Kohen, to the Kohanim, because the Kohen ultimately hands it to the king. Okay. Now, Hanosim Aron Shnasu Basis Chadesh Nespo. The Kohanim were the ones who would carry the Aron when there were miracles with it. Viel Kozik Israel. And Moshe also shared it with all of the elders. Shemiyadim Yikablu Kohanim as Torah Bahakel Kosesh Shoshaninu Chazan HaKnesses Nosin Rosh HaKnesses V'Rosh HaKnesses Laskan. Actually, the Kohanim get the Torah from the elders. So very interesting. So whereas according to Rashi, this is just Moshe has completed writing the Torah, and he feels like he should hand it to the elders of Klal Yisrael and the Kohanim because they are like the spiritual leaders of Klal Yisrael. According to the Sforno, that's what Rashi said. According to the Sforno, this is all about the mitzvah of Hakel, the mitzvah of the king reading from the Torah in the presence of the Jewish people. Okay, let's go on to verse 17. Let's actually start with verse 16. Sorry. Vayomer Hashem Moshe. Hashem says to Moshe, you are going to be passing away soon. This nation of yours is going to rise up. And they will follow after the foreign gods of the land. Asher hu vasham b'kirbo. They're going to go into the land of Israel and they're going to get caught up in avodah zarah. Va'azavani. They're going to leave me. Ve'feres brisia shekaratito. And the Jewish nation will subvert the covenant which I made with them. Verse 17. Pivo vayomahu. And I, God, will be angry at them at that day when they turn away from our covenant. Vazavtim, and I will leave them. Vistartifonai mehem vayolechol. I will turn my face away from them, and they will be consumed by others. Umtsauhu raos rabos v'tzoros. And many terrible things will befall the Jewish people. V'amar bayomahu. And the Jewish people will say on that day, hello, al ki ena l'kai b'kirbi mitzauni haraos ha'ela. The Jewish people say, wow, it must be that these difficult things are happening just because God's not in our midst. Okay, is that good or bad that they say it must be that God's not in our midst? Hold that thought. Verse 18, I am going to turn my face away on that day. On all the bad that the Jewish people did. Because they turned to other gods. So, if you thought that the Jewish people saying it's because God's not in my midst is good, then the obvious question is 18 should be, and then I'll take care of them and I'll save them, but that's not what it says in 18. What it says in 18 is I'm going to turn my face away from them. So that sounds like it's bad. So why is the Jewish people saying, oh, it's because God's not in my midst? Why is that bad? Or is it bad? Let's see the Ramban in Pasuk Zayin. V'tam v'yomar bayomahu halo al kienu l'kai b'kirbi einenu vidui gamur. This is not a complete confession of sin. So the Ramban says the fact that they say it's because God isn't in my midst means, says the Ramban, a recognition. It must be that we messed up. It must be that God's not in our midst because we messed up, which is exactly what God said is the reason. But even so, says the Ramban, it's not really a confession of sin. Kinyan vis vaduas avonam. In Parshas Bechukosai, it talks about when things go bad for the Jews, they confess their sins. It doesn't say here that they confess their sins. Avalhu hirur bacharata. It is these are such buzz phrases for us in this time of year. It's thoughts of regret. Sheyischartu al ma'alam. They regret their sinning against God. V'yakiru ki Hashem imhem. And they'll recognize that it's their fault. They're guilty. So it's partial credit. They recognize this is their doing. They feel bad about it, but they're not really dealing with it the way they need to deal with it. They need to confess their sins. They're not. So the Ramban says what it means when it says now, it says, I'll turn my face away. Ki ba'avur shehiraru Yisrael belibam ki chatu lelokim. Since the Jewish people recognized that they sinned, and they're finding these difficulties because God is not in their midst. God should save them. They're recognizing the avodah zarah is wrong. Skipping a line, therefore it says in the pasuk, "Kial harag dola sha'asu livtoach b'avodah zarah yastir od panim mehem lo k'mistar panim harishon shehister pnei rachamav tzaum raos rabos v'tzaros rakshu behester pnei geula." So the Ramban says it's not real tshuva, it's not full tshuva, because they don't confess their sins. But it's something, but it's not enough to save them. But the Ramban says in 17, when it says God turns away from them, it says all these bad things will fall to them. In 18, it just says, I'm going to turn my face away from them. It doesn't say all these terrible things. So he says, whereas in 17, it means God's going to punish them. In 18, it means God's not going to redeem them yet because they haven't done a full enough tshuva. So I don't want to hold people too long, but it's a very interesting perspective the Ramban has as to how to sort of make these two psukim flow. We discussed this morning different opinions of the Rishonim as to what Moshe means when he says, I'm not able to come and go. We discussed what exactly did Moshe write and why did he hand it to the Kohanim. And now we discussed the Ramban regarding what was lacking in the Jewish people's statement. Oh, it's because God's not in my midst.